Good evening to one and all. I welcome you all for Alumni Talk series of School of Architecture and Design. Today, architect Hakim Ali Reza will present on giving possibility to functionality with his batchmate from Politecnico the Milano, Federico Sassi. It's my pleasure to introduce both of them, and it's my proud moment to introduce our alumnus, architect Ali Reza. Ali Reza is an architect from 2012-17 batch of SA&D MUJ, living in different cities and working in diverse offices like Min2 Bouw-Kunst, Netherlands, then Studio Ponzini, Italy, INTACH Kashmir Chapter, and Center for Green Mobility, Ahmedabad. Gave him an opportunity to introspect his ideas about what architecture could be, as developed during academics. Having a keen interest in traditional handicrafts and architecture, he was presented with a citation by Craft Development Institute, Srinagar, in recognition to his promising services rendered in the promotion and revival of Kashmiri handicrafts through their incorporation into contemporary architectural practices. He was also awarded the Chairpersons Gold Medal for Overall Excellence and Gold Medal for achieving highest CGPA in the graduating batch 2016-17 of Manipal University Jaipur. After his graduation, he was working as an associate urban designer with the advisor to Government of Jammu and Kashmir for transport planning and urban design on projects like revival of Srinagar water transport and redesign of CBD. Having his researches published in various international journals, currently he is pursuing his MSc in Sustainable Architecture and Landscape Design from Politecnico the Milano and Politecnico the Torino in Italy. I welcome you, Architect Ali, and I think he was the topper throughout his throughout from first year to final year, and he was a self-motivated student. Like many times it happens that we used to tell him that Ali, now this is enough, but he used to work from within. So he's a very self-motivated student, and we are having proud alumnus as architect Ali Reza. Now I'll welcome architect Federico Sassi, and I will introduce him. Architect Federico Sassi is an architect from 2017 batch of Politecnico the Milano. After graduation, he worked in a design studio in Italy, mainly on renovation of sport facilities and urban plazas, in collaboration with various concerned administrative organizations. His research on adaptive reuse, exploring the interaction between historic and contemporary architectural vocabularies, has been published. Currently pursuing Masters in Sustainable Architecture and Landscape Design from Politecnico di Milano. His core area of interest is sustainable practices in modern architecture and exploring the interaction between natural and built environments. Ali will present on possibility to functionality, giving possibility to functionality. Why this topic? Basically, since the advent of civilization, the supremacy achieved over by man is based on the creative skills that have colossal impact visible on built and natural environment. However, there is always a possibility to achieve desired impact for betterment of mankind and allied. Today, architects and planners lives in times of environmental movement that has been a response to global issues ranging from resource crisis to climate change and similar, which calls for innovative solutions that are sustainable, affordable, flexible, and better adaptable to modern needs. In this session, architect Ali will present works that explore the alternatives of giving poetry to very strong forces of necessity and functionality, fostering positive social and environmental effects. This session raises the issue of such combinations that have the potential to be extremely powerful because they force these seemingly exclusive concepts together, conceiving a new hybrid that performs differently. So I welcome Architect Ali and Architect Federico for this session. Over to Ali.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I feel highly honored and obliged to be able to present at this platform. Can I share my presentation?
Yes, you can start.
Okay. So yeah, first I want to acknowledge your support that you have showed since I joined Manipal University, and you have always actually motivated and helped in whatever way I needed to be nurtured, and I really appreciate that, and you still continue to do so. As you can see in this slide, this is my progress from like first year when we were taught how to do freehand sketching and hand drafting, and then like use of complicated softwares. So I also thank Architect Federico to agree to present, and it will be a nice experience to get an insight into his perspective about design, being from a different cultural and context. So before starting the presentation, I want to start from this intense image in which you see like people gathered to get water from a well in the western state of Indian state of Gujarat. So this practice has been going on since the ancient times, and in most of the areas, it still continues, especially in the Indian subcontinent. And it's a very difficult routine, walking miles to get water, which is like the basic necessity of life, and doing it in this harsh and hot, dry desert sun. And how architecture responded to this basic need by through these elaborate step wells that were essentially architectural interventions done below grade, and they basically transformed this mundane routine into a very interesting and uh, inviting experience. They gave, as the topic says, they gave poetry to this necessity force of functionality or utility. And in these images, you can see like these are both step wells that are actually designed for this basic function of getting water. But in both of them, you can see like the secondary function of socialization seems to have overtaken its primary necessity or primary function of this architectural device. So before starting the presentation, I would just like to give a brief about the organization of the presentation. So we would be presenting 3 projects. The first one is Sequential Revelation. It's a landscape design project based on designing in a vineyard landscape in Italy. The second one is called Ricucire Ponticelli, which is architectural and urban design project, again based in South Italy. Ricucire literally, if translated in Hindi, means rough. So the idea is how the two contrasting scales of the project area have been darned together through architectural interventions. And it will be interesting to see a comparison between the design approach followed for a landscape design project and an architectural or urban design project. And the last one, called Reliving Tradition, is an interior or product design. So I would like to start with the first project. It's located in North Italian region of Cantina, Emilia-Romagna. It's a vineyard landscape, and as you can see in these images, these are like the different series of landscapes that you decipher once you go into that landscape. This project was developed in collaboration with Martha Castilla and Ontover, apart from me and Federico. So this is the image of the site. So you see this presence of a very strong central axis and vineyards on both the sides, and it terminates in the form of a hill. So this is the first impression of the site. But then there is almost like more than 60-70% of the vineyard on the other side of the hill. So once you go to that site, it's not able to perceive the whole surroundings in like one look. So before starting to design, we started with these questions like, can through design we offer a different possibility to this very functional and utilitarian landscape? And as human beings, we always have a subjective perception of beauty. But when you are dealing with landscape, it's like meddling with very strong forces of nature. So as designers, should we change the landscape according to our perception of beauty, or should we uh, have more subtle approaches so that we allow the landscape to change our perception of beauty? And since this vineyard culture is very deep rooted in the Italian context, it's a strong part of their intangible cultural heritage. So, how can we be revolutionary by introducing new activities in this functional landscape and not yet forget the basic identity of this? So, this is the basic location of the site. It's around 15 kilometers away from the nearest main town. It is accessible from a single road, and it's located in Val Nure, which is characterized by the presence of the river Nure. So, for the visual analysis, the site is characterized by a series of visual barriers manifested in the form of a natural vegetation or different elevations and geographical profiles. So the first one is this tree line that limits the field of vision till that point. Then from there you have this part between the two tree lines, which again is again frames the landscape in the opposite directions. Then from the top of the ridge you have another like a possibility of viewing this whole site till the river in form of a panorama, and then it terminates at the lake. The actual vineyard continues till the left end, as you can see on the screen, but our project terminates at the lake. Uh, we also did the path analysis to basically determine how the cantina is working. Cantina basically means a winery in Italian. So nothing in a landscape design is unnecessary. If you don't need a hard paving, it's not done. Or if you even need a hard paving, but you can manage with a soft paving or a semi-porous surface texture, that's how. That's why this path analysis. And this is the sensorial analysis. So as you see from the wing towards the interior of the cantina, the sensory perceptions change. Towards the road, you have presence of more like mechanical noises from the cars and the machines because the winery actually is there. But as you move towards the deep landscape, there are more natural sounds of birds and animals and the presence of basically a diverse one. Then coming to the soil analysis, although it's a landscape design, it's very important in case of this project because, as I already mentioned, this project is located in a valley. So this whole valley has been shaped by this river, you can see that. And this process has been going on for like centuries or even more. So how this river has shaped this valley and it defines the different surface textures and soil typologies and how that dictates the organization of this landscape. So if you see the areas closer to the river are not actually functionally used for any agricultural activities because it's a flat disk zone. Then the areas closer to the river, which are more fertile, they are used for normal agricultural practices, and the higher terraces only, which have actually not very fertile soil, they are the ones which are used for the cultivation of land. And also, it gives an idea about the bearing capacity in case of any architecture. Give an idea of the foundation. So in this image, you can see an initial idea about how this different diversity in this single cantina, we thought about like intertwining all of them through our design intervention and making people go into the cantina. And as I already mentioned, wine culture is very important in Italian context, and it's a very complicated art that takes like centuries to establish every aspect of it, from like the cultivation of the crop to the production of the wine to the fermentation to the aging. Everything has an effect on how the quality of the wine would be. And in Italy, they have like a production of more than 2,000 varieties of wine. So for the design concept, we identified 5 different acupuncture points characterized by a specific geometric character of the physical area surrounding it, and then try to merge them with different wine production processes so that this whole journey of visitors into the vineyard would be more informative, would be more enjoyable, and would be more engaging. So as you can see, each of these is a scheme for a different intervention that one passes through when one goes into the cantina. So this is a design strategy, and on the top you can see the side section, which raises around 40 meters from the lower level. So basically, we identified 5 acupuncture points based on the physical characteristics. Like in this part, you have this very geometric character by these vineyards. Then in this part, it's framed by this natural tree vegetation. And this is the slope part, which is characterized by the gaining in the elevation. And finally, this is the point from where you get the best views of the site. And then the lake is where you have reflection. So each of these points has been associated with a specific process in the cultivation of wine. The first one being genesis, relating to the conception of the sapling, conceiving of a sapling from the seed. The second one is the growth from sapling to a mature wine plant, and transformation from the fruit to the wine. And then in the top, you have the wine tasting, the final product. So this is the master plan. As you can see in this whole context, the design intervention is very minimalistic and very subtle and done only where it is extremely necessary. Now Federico will explain the interventions in detail.
Yeah, before going forward, I want to thank Dr. Madura for the introduction and the School of Architecture and Design of Manipal University in Jaipur for the opportunity. So, going on with the project, the first step is the genesis, and the aim of this architectural device is to enlighten the conception of the sapling from a seed, and highlighting the stratigraphy and composition of the soil that instills life into a dormant seed. As can you see from the plan, the installation is taking the visitors to a lower level, referred to the level of the vineyard. Next, Ali, please. Thanks to the staircases and ramped path, allow visitors to reach a lower level, and having also is also constantly changing the eye level of the users, having different perceptions of the grapevines from different angles. And also the experience is empowered by controlling natural light into the architectural device, giving the sensation of to the visitors in the darkness seeds into the soil. Are composed by rammed earth and supported by a steel mesh, and diverse layers of earth are reconstructed and informing visitors about this aspect of grapevine cultivation. Next slide, Ali. This is a view of the installation, and this is how to show how light is the installation and how it leaves the landscape as the most important subject in this intervention. Next. The second intervention is the growth. Next. And it's composed by different plaza placed at different level, and these are a metaphor for the states of maturation of a grapevine from a sapling to a fully grown fruit bearing plant. Next. This is represented through a serpentine circulation, actual topography, and through the changing volumes defined by walls that becomes bigger as visitors are crossing this sequence of spaces. Next, Ali. these are the walls. So the visitors starting from an narrow space, they have the feeling to being smaller, and while they are the serpentine, the spaces are becoming wider. So also the sensation of the visitors is to being bigger, and the walls that define these spaces are decorated with maturation processes, and also thanks to some holes inside the wall, they are framing the views, and they are also defining multifunctional spaces as an open-air theater. Next. As can you appreciate from this view, the colors of the surfaces paving that are mainly composed by gravel are changing also, representing the different colors of wine across the different seasons. Next. The third intervention is the transformation, and this is composed by 3 pavilions that highlights the process of wine production after the harvesting. Next. The 3 pavilions are located along the landings of staircases that takes visitors up to the slope. And from the section, you can see how the pavilions are above the level of the vineyards, giving them more importance than the pavilions, and leaving the landscape as free as possible. Next. The design of the 3 pavilions represents the fermentation and aging process, and they've been abstracted from physical. The first one is next, Ali. The first one is the crushing. So it represents the device that they use to crush the grapes immediately after the harvesting, and the fermentation, and giving the sensation to the visitors to being inside a barrel that they use for the fermentation of the wine. And the last one is the aging, and it represents this triangular stand that they use to aging the wine, especially the white wine, where they put the bottles. Next. These are the 3 renders of these 3 and a view of the third installation. The first one is the introspection, the climax, sorry, and the pavilion is represented by a pavilion that is nestled on the ridge, acting as landmark, orienting visitors and enhancing a trip that they did till now. Next slide. This is the plan de pavilion. Next. And the structure is cantilevering out over the vineyards and is covered by curtain steel that is contrasting the green of the surrounding, announcing its association to a more recent layer of time. Next. And when the visitor is watching at this installation from the bottom of the slope, it looks like an attractor. But from the ridge of the slope, thanks to the green roof also, the pavilion landscape gave it more importance. The dynamism of the structure is also reflected in the functionality. So the multifunctional interior space is dedicated to the tasting and also some exhibition related to the cantina. Next. Is the introspect, and this is the final intervention. Is designed as a deck and located on the lake ridge, extend inside the water. And next, it leads visitors below the water level, so they are reflected as a part of the landscape in the mirror placed in the water. Next. And as can you see from this view, the water itself is surrounded. The mirror is surrounded by water, so the water itself reflect the surrounding landscape and the mirror, making the experience more dramatic and introspective. And this stimulate contemplation of landscape that host the complex art of wine production, highlighting tangible and intangible Next. The next project is called Ricucire Ponticelli. Ricucire means darning. Ponticelli is nowadays a peri-urban area of the metropolitan city of Naples in southern Italy. During 50s and 60s, Ponticelli was a small settlement outside the city, characterized by agricultural field and agricultural economy that is nowadays preserved in the old city of. And through the years, and due to the expansion of the metropolitan city of Ponticelli and the urban plans, now Ponticelli is a part of the metropolitan city of Naples. We will work on the Ospedale del Mare precinct. That is one of the most important in Naples. And also for that, the project before, we want to give him more poetry and making some better places for livable spaces due to the functionality, the strong character and functionality of the hospital. And the project is called Ricucire because of the existing condition of the site, which is an abundance of open spaces and infrastructure, but this and to various physical and visual barriers. The main one is the railway that is dividing the site into two parts, the north being more to human scale, while the south being a metropolitan of absence. The first impression of the site are that the 28 hectares of the precinct is like a chaotic mosaic, but provided with conspicuous resources of public spaces. However, the dimension, scale, and distance between the parks, roads, facilities, and people makes the urban space seems suspended. And the north of the precinct is characterization of presence. In fact, this part is characterized by low settlement and narrow roads that preserve the neighborhood life. And this part is separated from the metropolitan dimension of absence on south, by the railway, which impairs easy pedestrian movement across. This southern part is characterized by high block residential house and wide. Next. So we started with the site analysis, starting from the macro scale context that is rich in mass mobility system as metro lines, trains, and bus. And in micro scale, the micro scale is predominantly residential with some commercial activities on ground level surrounding the hospital, and has an abundance of inaccessible greens disintegrated by urban infrastructure. Our aim at that scale was to design an intervention to make the area pedestrian and cycling oriented with a continuous system of public spaces. And due to the lack of any continuous pedestrian and cycling tracks, we want to do along the micro scale a strategy to provide a continuous connection from Rione Lotto Zero in south till Viargine in the north.
Okay, so coming to the design concept, as we already saw, the hospital, which is the main infrastructure in the center of this peri-urban context, it's a high-rise structure that doesn't basically blend into the surroundings in terms of its shape or in terms of its scale. So the idea was to introduce bold design interventions that sort of mediate that transition from the human scale in the north of the site to the metropolitan scale of the south. But while doing these interventions, it was necessary to understand the existing architectural vocabulary of the old city center, which is characterized by this rhythm of interesting facades, generally 2 or 3 floors high, which are all ideally different in their characteristics, but there is a certain homogeneity in the rhythm that the windows and the balconies basically provide to these otherwise diverse facades. Then there are also offsets in these buildings that create scope for different socialization activities. And also at some places you can see the roads or the public spaces are distributed across different levels that create some more interest in this urban context. So the design strategy basically identified different physical barriers and tried to remove them and relocate them to create a continuous connection. So the first barrier was there on this residential street, the existing houses. Basically, this hospital is private, so it has now a boundary. So the first one was to remove these houses and create a continuous connection into the hospital. Then the second one was removing this existing part of existing parking and the elevated helipad, and getting this pedestrian access till this point, which is characterized by the presence of the railway. Right now, there is no connectivity between these two parts due to presence of it. So by taking this railway underground and introducing these two new volumes, we create a continuous connection, a pedestrian and a bicycle connection from this area in the north to the area in the south. Now it's interesting to note that these new interventions are following sort of the design languages of both the north part, which is comprised by low-rise structures, and the south part, which is comprised by high-rise structures. In terms of the volume of these, in terms of volume, the dimension, and it resembles these existing structures, and in terms of functionality, it is complementing the activities of the. And finally, in the south part, we make an opening in this existing residential building to create a continuous. So basically, the open spaces were divided into three parts: high maintenance, low maintenance, and the third landscape areas. And then finally, they were given different activities based on the surrounding existing building. So in this master plan, you can see this existing street of this neighborhood was transformed into an outdoor living room with different sports activities and recreation. Then this existing hospital surface parking was relocated under the central plaza redesign there, and this now becomes the urban agricultural farm, which can be used by the people living in the neighborhood. And these new volumes, they sort of create a threshold from this neighborhood in the north to this public space. Then going down along this axis, we go through this civic avenue, which is framed by these new volumes, which are more open on the ground floor, keeping the design flexible enough to sort of take this space in case of emergencies, like in the current pandemic context. They are using this space for expanding the hospital activity. So the ground floors have been kept open to allow for that.
Ali, you are not audible. Ali, you are not audible.
Just a second.
Now you can.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So this becomes a linear path connecting the
last part of master plan. We lost the last part of master plan only.
Okay. So these buildings, the new introduced volumes, they are open on the ground floor, creating a scope for spillover activities and expansion of the hospital activities in case of situations like the current pandemic. This street, which in existing state is characterized by a railway surrounded by two carriageways. It goes underground, and this leaves scope for this linear path. connecting different sites along the east and the west axis, dotted by different pavilions. Again, the function of which are dictated by the surrounding activities. And this street, which now is like a 4-lane carriageway with on-street parkings and then service lanes. It's a 46-meter wide street. This again was realigned to incorporate like a elongated public plaza for the expansion spillover spaces of these commercial activities on the ground floor, and incorporating bicycle and pedestrian paths, and also the multi-utility zones. In this, you can see the comparison between the existing disintegrated green network and third landscape areas, and how through this continuous access, all of that is sort of unified as a single whole. These are the site sections that show the level difference. And in the first one, you can see by taking the railway underground, you and introduction of these new volumes, the eye movement gradually goes towards this towering hospital structure, mediating the scale of it. And in the second one, you can see by taking the parking underground as well as the railway, you have a continuous connection from the north to south, devoid of any physical or visual barriers. So for explaining this project, we divided it into 3 different areas. The first one is creating the threshold in the north. In this scheme, you can see like the existing site context has these residential blocks that were removed and reaccommodated in these new structures to create a opening into the hospital compound. And the new buildings accommodate commercial activities on the ground floor and community center on the upper floors. And in this one, the upper floors are residential blocks, which are basically the reaccommodated ones that we remove. So these also surround this, define the central plaza, and also lead into this urban agricultural setup, which is the reappropriation of the existing parking. The vegetation in this area is more ornamental, like oleanders, olives, flowering ash, and different shrubs and grasses, which are all local species. And the materiality is the local basalt stone, which in different textures and colors. And both the buildings as well as the plaza, they are treated in same materiality so that they sort of complement each other. This is a section of how this threshold works, and in the elevation, the use of the different textures of the material. And this is the urban agricultural park, in which these existing parking spaces have been reappropriated to either accommodate urban orchards, bicycle sharing stands, co-working spaces, or recreational gardens. And this is one of the modules of the residential blocks. This is a 2 BHK 100 square meter apartment, in which the private spaces are towards the back and the public spaces are more towards front, with scope for expansion of public areas into the corridors. In this view, you can see, this view is from north to south. So you can see how these new volumes, they follow a design language of these existing buildings, and also the alignment of them. So it looks like a continuous pedestrian or bicycle. The second area is the area of the linear path. So, these new 2 new volumes, which are G+3 and G+2 structures. So they basically define this central civic avenue, which is the core spine of this project. So they follow the orientation of the hospital, and also in this direction, if you see straight, there is the volcano, which is like the natural heritage of this site. So first, they mediate the scale of this hospital, and second, they guide the user flow, creating a more public space defined by these buildings, while leaving the private function of the hospital still as it is. The vegetation again is more ornamental, and the materiality in this case now becomes basalt, because the volcano that these structures frame, the tonality of that matches with this the color of this limestone. Again, it has been done in different textures to give variety to the surface. So this is the elevation of one of the blocks, which is the drug de-addiction center. And in this, you can see the use of the different textures and tones of the same material. And there is the hospital in the back, again the elevation of which has been treated. We'll see that after this. And these are the renders of the interior spaces of this other block, which is the meditation center. So these are details of 3 different meditation centers based on the concept of natural elements like light and water. The last intervention is the one of the linear park and the healing garden designed within this existing courtyard of the hospital. So these openings are existing in the current context, but they were made more prominent and more pedestrian, connecting it to the residential blocks on the east. So now this becomes more like a public space and not something that people can't access. Then in this linear park where there was the existing railway track, which now is underground, there are new pavilions. Like the first pavilion is the botanical garden, which is adjacent to this third landscape area. The second one is the water pavilion adjacent to the central plaza, around under which you have the new parking facility. And the third one is the outdoor classroom, which is adjacent to high school there. The materiality, again, in this case, is a combination of limestone and basalt, both of them being local stones. However, the vegetation in this case is less ornamental and more functional, comprising of huge trees that have been planted for their foliage and shading. The prime one among them being the Aleppo pine, which is a very characteristic tree of this landscape. So in this, you see the existing hospital facade, which in existing situation is like a massive block. How through this facade treatment, we visually break it into smaller disintegrate units, and then the residual spaces are treated with these facade treatments, basically these twisting louvers that have vegetation growing over them. So if you look at this thing, it doesn't look like a single unit, but like a composition of different structures, which again sort of merges with the existing language of the old city. And these are some technical details of how the vegetation grows over them. And specifically for the treatment of the hospital facade, the stones have been treated with this photocatalytic titanium dioxide, which absorbs the pollutants and breaks them into smaller non-toxic substances, which are washed away and absorbed into the ground when it rains. This is a view of interior of the hospital courtyard, which is redesigned as a healing garden. It incorporates natural elements of water and vegetation to stimulate all the natural senses, creating a more holistic experience. And this one is that outdoor classroom, which is designed in the form of an open-air theater, where the children from the neighboring high school or even like non visitors otherwise can go and socialize. This is the final render of this project, which is from the elevated walkway of the Civic Avenue. That's the central spine. You can see the new volumes frame the natural heritage while reflecting the essence of the built heritage. The last project is called Reliving the Tradition. It's basically some works of incorporating traditional handicrafts into contemporary design practice. Just to give an introduction, the Jammu and Kashmir has a tradition of handicrafts, and 6 of them are GI crafts. GI is, to put it in simple language, like a geographical indication. It's like an international copyright system, and 6 of its handicrafts have this GI certificate. One of them is paper mache, which you see in these images. And you see how historically this craft has been practiced by artisans, and it's essentially a craft based on doing motifs and painting objects made from recycled paper. So the craft in itself is dying because there are different regions and different reasons for this. And as a topic, it's very debatable. There are some discrepancies in the marketing of the craft. There are also some gaps between the innovation processes, but that's very debatable. But the result is that the craft is not as popular as it used to be in its existing state. So this is one of the, it's a coffee table basically incorporating, repurposing this old window from a Kashmiri house. and it incorporates two of these crafts. This the Kashmiri Pinjarakari, which is lattice work. This is again a GI craft, and then the paper mache. So using these two crafts to create a object which is a very functional object, but then by introducing these new elements, it gives it a new essence, and it starts to lose its, it becomes more of an exhibit than a normal table. Another example is this rethinking of vernacular architectural vocabulary. So in these images, you can see these are like traditional partition screens of old vernacular Kashmiri houses. So this is basically a system of arches, and these panels you can remove to create more open spaces or open these interiors to the exterior, or if used inside to sort of expand the spaces in case of public gatherings. And it also always goes in combination with this Pinjarakari craft. So this is a rethinking of the same function, which is not nowadays used in the interiors of the contemporary houses being built in the state. So it's reusing this craft for this is a wardrobe redesigned on the concept of this Barusi. And also how Pinjarakari, you can see in this case, has been used as a lamp. So it creates an interesting interplay of light and shadow, which is not actually the purpose how it was used traditionally. So in conclusion, we see that there can always be a possibility of giving poetry to these very strong forces of utility, fostering positive social and environmental effects. And the idea has the potential to be explored irrespective of the scale or typology of the project. The first one was a landscape design, the second was architectural, and the third one was more of a product design. But they all use this idea of giving an added value to these designs. And such combinations have a potential to be extremely powerful because they force these seemingly exclusive concepts together, conceiving a hybrid which performs. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ali, for such a wonderful presentation. Actually, our PG students were about to join, but I think because of some technical difficulty, they could not join as a presenter, landscape PG students. But there is a question from their side in the chat box, I can see. 1 minute. Yeah, Ali, can you throw light on landscape perception in other countries and in India? They want to just know that how landscape architecture is perceived in the Western country and in India.
Okay, so in India, the general concept that it's my personal opinion that the general idea of landscape design is more based on like the aspects of the fauna that you use in the design. Like as a landscape designer, you are obligated to hear a noise. Can you hear me?
Disturbance, I think.
Yeah, now it's fine.
Now it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. As a landscape architect in Indian context, you are obligated to know the species of the trees or the flowers that you are supposed to plant in a landscape and their maturation periods and their foliage. It's an integral part of landscape, very true. But then landscape design in itself, it requires a high level of sensitivity because in this case, you are meddling with the strong forces of nature. And it's very complicated compared to the architectural or urban design practices where you already have a built context from where you can take references as it is. As we saw in these projects, like the landscape design project, it had a very, it actually didn't touch any aspect of fauna. The existing vegetations were returned as it is, but the design interventions, you need to know like that very thin line where you need to stop intervening with the landscape because you are competing with like the nature. But in the other architectural design project, the interventions were very bold. They were massive in terms of both urban design as well as the new architectural volumes introduced. So I think this is a major difference in Indian context compared to the European ones. Here, the approach is more sensitive, and here it's they sort of the interventions are very minimalistic. It's more like identifying these acupuncture points, whereby a very small and subtle intervention, it can have a huge impact. Maybe Federico can add to that.
Yeah, I agree with Ali. And I want just to add something that, in my opinion, architectural landscape here, especially in Italy, nowadays is important to link the nature with the cities, because those places that we call third landscape, that are these residual spaces in the peri-urban area, like in the project in Naples that we showed. So I think that architectural landscape is important in that spaces that are nowadays, most of them are and are residual, not used. So if an architect as architectural landscape is able to define and project well as possible these spaces, I think that we can relink the cities with the nature.
Thank you. We can take next question by Snehal Mathur. She said, great presentation, extremely insightful. Could you also throw some light on methods and role of achieving a balance between poetry and narratives along with the plant palette in a design journey?
Okay, thank you, Snehal. That's actually a very complicated question, but I mean, as a designer, design is always subjective and relative. You just need to have that sensitivity. I personally believe that it can't be taught. It can just be learned through your experience. You just feel like if something is if something fits in a context or not. But yeah, as specifically talking about landscape design, in my personal opinion, the design interventions have to be as minimal and as subtle as possible. And as I already mentioned in this project of the vineyard design, you have to sort of allow, instead of dominating over the landscape, you have to allow the landscape to dominate you. And this you can achieve through these subtle design interventions that basically can perform as these mediators of this interaction between human and the landscape. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Ali. Bibhu is there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, you can take over to Bibhu now.
Thank you, ma'am. It is indeed a great presentation, Ali and Federico. You have certainly discussed different layers of design through these three projects that you have presented. One is primarily landscape, other one is an urban scale stuff. I would rate the last project as more of a conservation and product stuff. It is very, very insightful from the perspective that design is not limited to a particular scale. It can happen anywhere. And it is, as Ali has said, it cannot be taught. You have to learn it. And of course, I think Ali has mastered this art of learning.
Thank you, sir.
Indeed. Okay, so thank you very much for presenting it to all the students, and we intend to also publish it on some platform, on some social media platform, so that more people can also take the benefit of it. So thank you very much. I would now ask Sunanda ma'am to conclude and give a vote of thanks. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, sir.
it was a great listening to you. So I also really feel honored to present a vote of thanks to our own Ali, our esteemed alumni architect Hakim Ali Reza and his colleague Federico. And I, on the behalf of School of Architecture and Design, Manipal University Jaipur, thank both the speakers for gracing and sharing with us your findings and opinions through different projects and different learnings. Also, I would like to extend a special thanks to Dr. Madhura Yadav, Director, School of Architecture and Design, for inspiring us to organize this event, which was of a great learning. And also big thanks to architect Bibu and architect Akshay for making this event successful, all the technical things they were taking care of. And in the last, I will definitely like to thank all the participants for to be benefited from this entire talk and through different projects which you shared with us. So it is again very great to see you on the screen. Means so it is all, it's a formal thanks from us. Definitely, we are always, we know that you keep on helping our own students to the workshops and all that. And be in touch and wishes from us. Okay. Over to Madhura ma'am. Ma'am, you want to say something?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Ali, for such a wonderful presentation. And it's always proud to listen to our alumnus of School of Architecture and Design. And very happy to see your journey from undergraduate to masters. And I think you have completed masters now. And you can come to your alma mater at any time for any kind of thing like expert lecture or a seminar or a workshop. This is your school, and I am proud to say that you are a alumnus of a founder batch of SA&D, and you have set the benchmark for other students to be there. Thank you so much, Ali. Be in touch with us.
Thank you so
best
much,
wishes to Frederick also for such a wonderful presentation. And he is also welcome at the School of Architecture and Design at any time.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank
you so much, Sanata ma'am.
Thank you
and
so much.
Vibhu sir, Akshay sir for organizing this and inviting to present. It's an honor. Thank you.
Okay, we are signing off, Pani.
Thank you
so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, all the best.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.